The night was heavy with an oppressive darkness as I embarked on that eerie drive, my fingers gripping the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. I had just left a somber family gathering, still mourning the loss of my grandmother. The rain splattered against the windshield, casting shimmering tears upon the glass, mirroring my own emotions. My grandmother had been my rock, my confidant, and her recent passing had left a gaping void in my heart. As I maneuvered through the winding, forested road, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow still with me, her presence lingering like a fading whisper in the back of my mind. I needed closure, and I hoped the drive would help. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered, causing my heart to race. Panic surged as I coasted to a stop on the desolate road, illuminated only by the dim glow of my taillights. I tried to restart the engine, but it stubbornly refused to come to life. With a sigh, I reached for my phone, only to find it devoid of signal. The isolation of the woods, combined with the mournful rain, sent a chill down my spine. I decided to step out into the misty night to check under the hood. The cold rain clung to my skin as I fumbled with the latch, opening the hood to reveal a tangle of unfamiliar wires. I knew little about cars, and panic threatened to overwhelm me. It was then, in the midst of my despair, that I heard it, the faint, haunting sound of a lullaby. The tune was achingly familiar, the very same lullaby my grandmother had sung to me as a child. I followed the ethereal melody into the woods. I admit now that this was a foolish decision. The rain grew heavier, drenching me to the bone, but I couldn't turn back. The lullaby led me deeper into the forest, where the trees seemed to close in, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab me. And then I saw her, a figure in a white nightgown standing beneath an ancient oak tree. Her back turned to me as she continued to sing the haunting lullaby. I couldn't see her face, but there was no doubt in my mind. She was my grandmother. Tears welled in my eyes as I approached, calling out to her, but she remained unmoving, her voice unwavering. I reached out to touch her shoulder, and as my fingers brushed against her cold skin, she turned to face me. What I saw was not my beloved grandmother, but a ghastly, withered version of her, her eyes hollow and devoid of warmth. With a blood-curdling scream, I stumbled back, tripping over a gnarled root and falling to the ground. The nightmarish figure of my grandmother advanced towards me, her bony fingers outstretched. In that moment, I knew I had to escape. I scrambled to my feet and ran back to the road, leaving the haunting lullaby behind. As I reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, desperately trying to start the engine. Miraculously, it roared to life, and I sped away from that nightmarish encounter. The outcome of my night drive was far from the closure I had sought. Instead, it left me with a horrifying memory that would haunt my dreams for years to come. My grandmother's presence had lingered, but not in the comforting way I had hoped. Now, whenever I close my eyes, I can still hear that haunting lullaby echoing in the recesses of my mind. One dark night many years ago, I found myself navigating a lonesome stretch of highway, raindrops drumming a haunting rhythm on my windshield. My mind was clouded by the memories of a recent breakup, the wounds of which were still raw. It had been a tumultuous relationship, one that left me emotionally battered, and this night drive was meant to be my escape, a chance to clear my head. As I cruised through the downpour, the rhythmic swish-swish of the wipers seemed to echo my troubled thoughts, the road ahead mirroring the uncertain path of my life without her. Minutes turned into hours as the rain showed no sign of relenting. My vision blurred as I delved deeper into the inky blackness, and the eerie emptiness of the road weighed heavily on my already weary soul. Then, as if on cue, my car's engine sputtered, warning lights flashing on the dashboard, and I coasted to a halt on the desolate stretch of highway. Panic washed over me, a tidal wave of despair. I knew almost nothing about cars, and I cursed my bad luck for leaving me stranded on this desolate road in the middle of the night. I reached for my phone, praying for a signal, but it was as dead as the engine. Trapped in this forsaken place, I had no choice but to investigate the problem myself. With trembling hands, I popped the hood, the cold rain drenching me as I peered into the engine compartment. I could see nothing out of the ordinary, and my limited automotive knowledge left me feeling helpless. Just as I was about to give up, I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing through the rain. Panic gripped me, and I turned to see a shadowy figure approaching from the darkness. My heart pounded as I strained to make out details, but the figure remained obscured by the rain. With dread pooling in my gut, I called out, asking if they needed help, but there was no response. The figure drew closer, its movements eerily silent, and I felt a surge of terror unlike any I had ever experienced. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to abandon the car and flee into the night. I slammed the hood shut and darted back into the driver's seat, fumbling with the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just in time as the figure reached my car. I hit the gas pedal, my tires spinning in the rain as I accelerated away from the ominous presence. The figure pursued, its footsteps echoing in the recesses of my mind. As I drove, fear and adrenaline pumping through my veins, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. The outcome of that night drive left me shaken and scarred. My breakup no longer the source of my turmoil. I had no idea what that person wanted, but I know that it wasn't anything good. The night stretched on endlessly as I embarked on a marathon drive, making my way to a job interview in a state that is a couple states away. I had reserved a room in a hotel near where I will have the interview. The dim glow of the dashboard lights was my only companion, casting eerie shadows in the confines of the car. I had recently lost my job, a devastating blow that had left me desperate for a fresh start. The opportunity of this interview held the promise of a new beginning, but it required traversing a lonely highway in the dead of night through unfamiliar terrain. Rain pounded against the windshield, mirroring my anxiety and apprehension as I navigated the winding road, my thoughts filled with the weight of uncertainty. The dim, buzzing radio flickering in and out of signal added to the sense of isolation, and the drive seemed to go on forever as I kept going. As the hours crawled by, my eyelids grew heavy, and fatigue settled in like a heavy shroud. Desperation urged me to continue, to reach the interview that held the potential to change my life. But the road seemed endless, and exhaustion gnawed at my resolve. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air slap me awake, but it did little to dispel the creeping unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Then, as I drove through a desolate stretch of highway, I spotted something ahead. A hitchhiker standing on the roadside, drenched by the relentless rain. Instinctively, I slowed down, my empathy overriding my better judgment. The figure was shadowy and indistinct, but as I got closer, I could see it was an elderly woman, frail and hunched, her clothes sodden and her hair plastered to her face. I pulled over and she approached the car, her eyes hollow and lifeless. Her voice trembled as she explained that her car had broken down, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere. Sympathy welled within me, and I offered to give her a lift to the nearest town. She accepted with a nod, and I unlocked the doors, relieved to have some company on this lonely journey. But as she settled into the passenger seat, a chill coursed through me. There was something off about her, something that sent shivers down my spine. Her presence seemed to leach the warmth from the car, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. We drove in silence for a while, the rain drumming on the roof, the darkness outside the windows seemingly impenetrable. The woman's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, and her breathing grew increasingly labored. I asked if she was okay, but she didn't respond. Then, as we approached a dimly lit stretch of road, she turned to me, her eyes wide and filled with an unnatural intensity. Her lips curled into a sinister smile, revealing jagged, yellowed teeth. Panic surged within me as I realized that this was no ordinary hitchhiker. I slammed on the brakes and the car skidded to a stop. Without a word, the woman opened the door and stepped out into the pouring rain. Her form disappeared into the darkness, leaving me trembling and bewildered. What became of that long night drive was a lingering sense of dread and the unshakable feeling that I had narrowly escaped a malevolent force. I continued on my journey, haunted by the encounter, and ultimately arrived at the hotel. I will never forget what happened that night.